fallout. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think Fallout is going to prove to be a jolly popular selection for grade 3, so let's look at some detail. Firstly, obviously look at their suggestions for tone in the walkthrough, especially their observation about not making it too modern a metal sound. Now, I must admit, I find that I can't really use exactly their amp settings on my gear, so obviously the most important thing for you as well is that what you're getting sounds good in the first place. I would suggest that even if the precise amp settings don't really necessarily work with this one, the main thing to avoid making it sound too modern is to avoid using effects beyond overdrive or distortion. So if you're using a preset in a multi-effects pedal, make it a fairly basic sound. If you've got a selection of pedals, basically stick with the overdrive and maybe a tiny little bit of reverb. So let's look at some technical observations. Right at the beginning, we've got the challenge of doing these pull-off slurs. You notice that you're barring your first finger just a little bit on the 7th fret. The danger with that when you do your pull-off from the 9th fret B is that you might accidentally sound the 3rd string. My suggestion in this kind of circumstance is if when you pick the first chord that you're pulling off, allow your pick to actually rest on the 3rd string. Then when you do the pull off, even if your 3rd finger does slightly graze the 3rd string, which it may well, it can't sound the 3rd string because your pick is resting on it. The other thing about resting your pick on the 3rd string like that is it makes you really lay into that sound quite aggressively, and I think that's pretty helpful and appropriate for this one. And also quite a few other places in this opening riff it's helpful to do that angling of the pick onto the 3rd string. Again, it helps it be quite aggressive and assertive as a beginning, but also it helps you actually play a bit more cleanly, because when you're kind of flaying into it like that, it's not difficult, shall we say, to accidentally play the 3rd string, and that would be a pretty negative sound. You don't want that at all. When you get into section B, you notice that you've got these quarter tone bends on the 3rd fret G, and especially because this is the 6th string, even though it's quite a low fret, nonetheless the 6th string is very easy to bend, so it would be quite easy to bend it too far. up into the sound of the 4th fret, and you really don't want that. It's only meant to take the 3rd fret note, the G natural, and bend it a little bit. So basically, don't let your hand get carried away with that bend, or indeed its equivalent when you get to the next page and you're doing a similar thing on the 5th string. As far as the solo is concerned, their suggestion is in the walkthrough is very sound. One particular thing I would say is have a look at the solo to Black Sabbath Paranoid. Obviously don't steal the entire thing, but especially the first couple of lines of that solo you might find helpful for some sort of useful ideas, especially the way it mixes hammer-ons and slides, stuff like that. When we get to the top of the 2nd page, section D, we've got this developed idea from the 1st page where you have, and the first of the long notes on the 3rd fret G is marked with a vibrato, and then the A and the B flat are not. I must admit, if this track was in one of the later grades, this whole section, section D, would probably be marked to develop the repeat. And so, especially when you do the repeat, in other words when you play section D for the 2nd time, feel free to maybe put some vibrato in on those other longer notes as well. Personally, I think it might start sounding a bit kind of mechanical and deliberate just to play it precisely as it is. On the other hand, if you're not comfortable with that because you think, hey, I'm not playing what's written, so I might get in trouble with the examiner, then obviously play what's written. But it would be worthwhile exploring that kind of thing, not all the time, but just to do the sort of thing that does actually start to make the track your own. And it's always worth stressing, they're not really looking for a carbon copy of the CD recording, they're looking for a performance of your own. So long as you're not doing things differently in a way that makes it easier or that's just stylistically inappropriate, there's a lot to be said for personalising it in your own little way. When we get to section E, where we end up on the 5th string, you might have noticed that I feel it's helpful to put in a few judicious palm mutings here. Actually also on the 1st page as well sometimes, but especially when you have these open 5th strings at the end of the 1st bar of E. I think it's quite helpful to palm mute those, and also the equivalent notes in the 2nd bar of E immediately before. And then obviously we get back into section F, which is a reprise of the beginning. One really important little changed detail thing to take account of here. If you look at bar 4, the end of bar 4, you've got this, the rhythm of which is 3, 4 in the semiquavers or 16th notes. Little aside for a moment, they really do have to be all with downstrokes, even though that means you're playing downstrokes really quite fast. Don't even think about alternating the pick direction there, it's not really a power chord type thing. Anyway, coming back, so you're doing 1, 3, 4 like that, and then when you get to bar 25 just before the end, you've got kind of the same thing, but the rhythm is different. You get 3, 4, in other words written as triplets, 3 quavers or 8th notes in the bar. And obviously that's a small detail that in the heat of the moment it might be easy to overlook, especially if you're playing it from memory at an early stage perhaps. So basically notice that kind of detail. It's the sort of thing I'm sure examiners are going to be looking out for. It also raises that sort of perennial last subject of mine, which is especially with a track like this, where you've got a fairly simple backing track with just the drums and the bass. There's loads of places where you as the guitar player have to synchronise with the rhythm, especially that the bass and largely as well the drums are actually playing. And in fact that thing I've just mentioned about bar 4 and bar 25, of course your backing track is playing in bar 4, it's playing semiquavers or 16th notes, and in bar 25 it's playing the triplets. But there are many other places where you get these kind of or rhythms where it's really important to make sure that you're actually listening to your backing band, inverted commas, your CD, to make sure you're doing the same thing as they are. So anyway, have a great time with this one. It's a lot of fun.